In the film industry, it's not uncommon for movies to be seen in a completely new light over time, taking on unexpected meanings, even ones the creators never intended. This happens because of the ambiguities and hints that filmmakers either deliberately or accidentally add to their stories. These unsaid things lead to discussions where, even years later, viewers still debate what the movie was really trying to say. American Psycho is no exception to this.
Hey, Paul!
For some, it's a story about violence and cruelty. Others see it as a satire on consumer culture and social norms, while some just view it as a stylish thriller about a rich psychopath who gets away with everything. The range of interpretations is impressive, but what surprised me is that, in many discussions, certain moments get blown out of proportion while truly important details go unnoticed. For example, not many people stop to think that the main character is actually not a psychopath at all. Don't believe me? Give me a bit of time and I'll explain everything. American Psycho came out in 2000, and maybe some of you don't remember the plot too well. Let's refresh our memories on the key moments. The main character, Patrick Bateman, is a successful Wall Street banker who seems to embody success at first glance. But behind this mask is his dark side. Bateman is a serial killer with terrifying brutality. He lives in two completely different worlds. In one, he's a typical member of Manhattan's elite, discussing fashion trends, expensive restaurants, stylish clothes, and women with his colleagues. In the other, he's a ruthless killer, coldly dealing with his victims.
Hello?
At first, these two worlds seem completely incompatible, but it's their contradiction that defines Bateman's life. Among his victims are a homeless man with a dog, several women in service jobs, random passersby, a cop, a security guard, and a janitor. However, the key event that drives the whole movie is the murder of his colleague, Paul Allen.
Is that a raincoat? Yes, it is.
Throughout the movie, Patrick's mental state becomes increasingly unstable. At one point, he can't take it anymore, calls his lawyer, Harold Carnes, and confesses to all his crimes.
Some homeless people, maybe 5 or 10. An NYU girl I met in Central Park. I left her in a parking lot behind some donut shop. I killed Bethany.
But then, something strange happens. When Bateman goes back to Paul Allen's apartment, where, according to his expectations, the bodies should be, he finds the place empty and up for sale. Later, when he meets his lawyer at a restaurant, he mentions his phone confession from the previous day.
Did you get my message?
Jesus, yes, that was hilarious. That was you, wasn't it?
But Carnes, mistaking him for someone else, laughs it off and thinks it's just a joke.
What exactly do you mean?
The message you left.
Wait, Harold. What do you mean?
Oh, excuse me, nothing. It's good to see you.
When Bateman insists, the lawyer confidently states that he recently saw Paul Allen in London.
Because I had dinner with Paul Allen twice in London just 10 days ago.
No, you...
The film is full of oddities and little details that are easy to miss. Characters constantly mix each other up. Patrick is called by other people's names several times.
Nice cat.
Hello, Halberstram.
Hey, McCloy. What?
Marcus.
Mr. Smith. Davis.
We often see him with headphones, and every time before a murder, for some reason, he starts talking about music and discussing albums.
Crucial, really. That's beautifully stated on the album.
I have an interesting theory about why he does this, and I'll explain it for sure. Also, he mentions videotapes he needs to return to the rental store a few times.
I've got to return some videotapes. I guess I was probably returning videotapes. I have to return some videotapes.
Can all of this be explained in one way? Of course. But let's break it down step by step. And the first question we need to figure out is, were the murders even real? Let's start with the murder of Paul Allen. It takes place in Patrick Bateman's apartment, and it's important to pay attention to the surroundings. What stands out right away? Everything is perfectly white and spotless. After the murder scene, we're shown the apartment again.
Do you want a bite?
I'm on a diet, but thank you.
No need to lose any weight.
And what do we see? Where are the bloodstains on the walls or the floor? Yes, the sofas were covered with slipcovers, and there was a newspaper on the floor. But could this really have fully protected the space? During the blows, blood splatters everywhere. Patrick's face ends up covered in it. When he drags the body bag, there's a noticeable trail behind him, and yet the apartment remains in pristine condition.
Do you want a bite?
I'm on a diet, but thank you.
It's also important to consider who owns the apartment. This is someone who worries that an ice cream spoon will stain the table,
No, put it in the carton.
that a cup will leave a mark,
I haven't heard.
and who's uncomfortable when anyone touches him.
Looks so soft.
Dr. Bateman, what's the matter? No shiatsu this morning?
Touching me like that means draw back a stump.
Hold on there, little...
By the way, we'll come back to this point. Now, let's recall the moment when the maitre d' at the restaurant doesn't pay any attention to Bateman. Then he goes to Paul Allen's apartment and leaves a message for his girlfriend.
Hi, this is Paul. Been called away to London for a few days. Meredith, I'll call you when I get back. Hasta la vista, baby.
But would she really not recognize the voice of someone close to her? Next, let's talk about the scene with the homeless man. Why is a well-dressed young man wandering alone through empty, dark streets? In one episode, he walks through alleyways with a briefcase, and in another, he's driving around in a limousine with a personal driver. Now, pay attention to his victims among the women. When he brings them back, he doesn't do it to his own apartment, but to Paul Allen's.
This is nicer than your other apartment.
Oh, it's not that nice.
This happens after the detective tells him that Allen left, taking his things. So, at least his girlfriend should have had access to the place.
Had his apartment been burglarized?
No, actually it hadn't. Toiletries were missing, a suit was gone, so was some luggage, that's it.
And yet, Bateman calmly walks into the apartment where the bodies are already present. There's even a chainsaw lying around. But the strangest thing, nobody notices anything. The girl is running around the building in panic, shouting and knocking on doors, but no one reacts. Patrick is running around the floors completely naked, holding a chainsaw, and remains unnoticed. There's a huge pool of blood downstairs, but later, no one seems to care. And when Bateman returns to Allen's apartment at the end of the movie, there's nothing left. The woman who greets him even says it's not Paul Allen's apartment.
I'm looking for Paul Allen's place. Doesn't he live here?
No, he doesn't.
After the scene with the ATM and the cat, things get even more surreal. The moment when Patrick tries to stuff the cat into the ATM already signals absurdity. Then he pulls out a gun,
Oh my God.
which he didn't have before, and soon it disappears, turning into an ordinary pen. He starts shooting wildly, and suddenly both police cars explode in a spectacular way. And even Bateman himself is shocked, looking at his weapon. Considering all this, we can suggest that much of what happens in American Psycho is a product of Patrick's imagination. And I have a few arguments to support this theory. First of all, we should pay attention to the narrative style. Almost all scenes are shown from Bateman's perspective, so we're seeing the world through the eyes of a person with an unstable mind. Now let's look at the characters. David Van Patten, Timothy Bryce, Paul Allen, Louis Carruthers.
Paul Allen's on the other side of the room over there.
Maybe they're just different sides of Patrick's personality, his alter egos. They all have the same credit cards,
Not bad.
similar clothes, the same status. All of them are vice presidents of the same company. Later, when Patrick goes to the restaurant, Timothy Bryce is sitting next to his fiancée.
Positive we won't have a decent table, but we do. And relief washes over me in an awesome way.
But the weirdest part is when Timothy starts kissing her neck in a very relaxed way, and Bateman doesn't react at all.
Okay, all right.
Why? Because Timothy is actually him. It's no wonder Patrick is constantly mistaken for other people. He's impersonating imaginary figures.
Nice cat.
Hello, Halberstram.
Hey, McCloy. What?
Marcus!
Mr. Smith.
When he first brings the women to his apartment, he calls himself Paul Allen.
I'm Paul. My name's Paul Allen. You got that?
At first glance, this might seem like an attempt to hide his identity, but what if, at that moment, he genuinely believes he is Paul Allen? Later, Louis thanks Patrick for taking his girlfriend to Dorsia, even though it's strange that his fiancée would discuss this with her fiancé.
Patrick, thanks so much for looking after Courtney. Dorsia, impressive. How on earth did you get a reservation there?
And Paul Allen himself mistakes Bateman for Marcus Hallstrom.
Allen has mistaken me for this dickhead Marcus Halberstram. It seems logical because Marcus also works at PNP and in fact does the same exact thing I do.
Maybe Marcus is another version of Bateman.
He also has a penchant for Valentino suits and Oliver Peoples glasses. Marcus and I even go to the same barber, although I have a slightly better haircut.
Notice how, in one scene, the conversation starts with Timothy Bryce, but the camera quickly switches to Bateman.
Doors on Friday night. How do you swing that?
I think he's lying.
We're hearing their thoughts because they are the same person. This behavior can be seen in other scenes as well.
Sorry, dude. Steroids. Okay, let's do it.
And finally, the business cards. David Van Patten, Timothy Bryce, Paul Allen, Louis Carruthers.
That is really nice. White.
Look at that subtle...
All of them work at the same firm and hold the same position. Well, that happens. Moreover, all these people also have the same phone numbers. Too many coincidences, right? That's right, because it's the same person. It seems that by the end of the film, Bateman himself starts to realize that his friends are just creations of his imagination.
Bateman.
Patrick is insane. Remember the cat he tries to stuff into the ATM? There's another cat in the movie. Here it is. If you think about it, why would the screenwriters add this moment? Most likely, it's a hint that the ATM scene is not real, but yet another fantasy of Bateman's. There's another strange moment in his behavior. Did you notice that throughout the film, he says creepy things, but those around him seem to ignore it?
I want to stab you to death.
If you don't shut your mouth, I will kill you.
Now listen, I like to dissect girls.
Oh, murders and executions mostly.
The thing is, he's probably saying these things in his head. Also, Bateman clearly draws inspiration from films and music. He constantly mentions videotapes he needs to return.
I've got to return some videotapes.
I guess I was probably returning videotapes. I have to return some videotapes.
And everywhere he goes, there's a TV or a VCR. Even in Courtney's bedroom, there's a TV. One particularly interesting moment is in his apartment, where a scene from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre flashes on the screen. This could suggest that the murders shown in the film are nothing more than projections of his fantasies, inspired by movies. Another source of inspiration for him is music. Notice how he starts talking about songs and albums precisely at those moments when he's about to kill someone.
To Elvis Costello, but I think Huey has a far more bitter, cynical sense of humor.
Hard to choose a favorite among so many great tracks.
This is hardly a coincidence. It's possible that the violent scenes in the movie are simply daydreams triggered in his mind while he listens to music. For example, the moment when he leaves a message on the answering machine, supposedly in Paul Allen's apartment. But immediately after, we see him sitting in the office, listening to music. At first, this might seem like a different scene, but in reality, it's the same day. This means all of this was happening only in his mind. And it makes sense now when his secretary finds a journal filled with creepy drawings. This is another confirmation that, most likely, all the crimes existed only in his head, born under the influence of music and films. Remember the scene where the secretary asks him about the crossword?
Doing the crossword?
If you take a close look at it, there are only two words written: meat and bones. At first glance, American Psycho seems like a story about a serial killer. But if you dig deeper, it becomes clear that it's not a typical thriller about a psychopath. The scene with Detective Harold Kimball is another piece of evidence that much of what happens in the film exists only in Bateman's mind. First, why would a detective investigate the disappearance of a person who, according to witnesses, isn't missing and is currently in London? It doesn't make sense. Second, why does the detective come to Patrick? Why does he meet with him several times, as though he's a suspect? In what, exactly? The fact that Paul Allen went to London? The third strange discrepancy is in their conversation. They start talking about a murder.
I mean, to think that one of his friends killed him for no reason whatsoever would be too ridiculous.
But if there's no evidence and no report of a crime, why would the detective even bring it up? It feels more like an episode from an old detective series like Columbo rather than an actual investigator's conversation.
When was the last time you were with Paul Allen?
We'd gone to a new musical. Well, does Marcus have an alibi?
Yes.
Also, music becomes a motif again. The detective suddenly pulls out a disc and talks about music.
Great stuff. I just bought it on my way here. You heard it?
Never.
And we already know that music for Bateman is tied to his hallucinations and fantasies. This is another hint that the entire scene with Kimball might have just been an illusion. Now, let's try to figure out what's going on in the main character's mind. Bateman constantly imagines himself as someone else. He's often mistaken for other people, and he has conversations with characters who probably only exist in his mind. This could point to dissociative identity disorder. He's obsessed with cleanliness, constantly washing himself.
After I remove the ice pack, I use a deep pore cleanser lotion. In the shower, I use a water-activated gel cleanser.
Maintaining perfect order in his apartment. And dislikes being touched.
You look so soft.
Natsu this morning?
Touching me like that. Put it in the carton. I haven't.
These are all typical signs of obsessive-compulsive disorder. He's obsessed with his appearance and status. He doesn't show empathy for others. He manipulates people. He reacts strongly when someone has something better: a business card, an apartment, a restaurant.
Something wrong? Patrick? You're sweating.
He frequently asks if people know who he is and what he does.
So, don't you want to know what I do?
He looks down on those he considers lower in status. This all points to narcissistic personality disorder, not psychopathy.
You know how bad you smell. You reek of shit. Do you know that?
I don't have anything in common with you.
Hallucinations and delusional ideas can be symptoms of schizophrenia. In his case, it manifests as a distorted perception of reality, an inability to separate fantasies from reality. Classic psychopathy doesn't include hallucinations and delusions. Yes, psychopaths lack empathy, but they are cold and rational. Bateman, however, experiences emotions, gets irritated, worries about his status, and has a distorted perception of reality. Even if we allow that he has elements of psychopathy, his condition is closer to a combination of narcissistic personality disorder and schizophrenia than to classic psychopathy. If American Psycho isn't about psychopathy, what is it really about? On a deeper level, it's a satirical commentary on the superficiality and emptiness of society. Bateman is the embodiment of the 80s yuppie, successful, rich, handsome, but completely empty inside. He lives in a world where appearance matters more than substance, where status, brands, and expensive restaurants mean more than human relationships. Perhaps the film isn't about a maniac at all, but about the fractured mind of someone living in a consumer society, where identity gets lost among identical suits, business cards, and meaningless conversations. American Psycho can be seen as a story about the disconnect between appearance and reality. At the beginning of the film, Patrick Bateman delivers the key phrase,
Because I want to fit in.
In his pursuit of conformity, he loses his understanding of the difference between being and seeming. This motif is even reflected in the details. For example, in the film's credits, there's a liquid we initially perceive as blood, but it's later revealed not to be blood at all. This misdirection mirrors Bateman's struggle to reconcile what he projects with who he really is. If, at the time of the film's release, Bateman epitomized the yuppie, the successful yet empty elite, today, he can be compared to metrosexuals. The term metrosexual was coined in 1994 by British journalist Mark Simpson. He combined the words metropolitan and sexual, but it's not about sexual orientation. Rather, it's about lifestyle. Metrosexuals pay a tremendous amount of attention to their appearance, skincare, fashion, and status symbols. They are always aware of the latest tech trends, go only to barbershops, wear designer clothes, and stay up to date with trends. Much like Bateman, these individuals strive to conform to certain standards, sometimes even beyond their financial means.
Because I want to fit in.
Their main flaw is the confusion between form and substance. They fail to understand the difference between being someone and merely looking like someone, a society where brand matters more than substance. In today's world, this is reflected in the obsession with brands. Courchevel, the Maldives, iPhones, Teslas, Pradas. People are willing to do anything for these names, forgetting what they truly represent. People like Bateman attract us with their flawless appearance, like luxury limousines. They shine, tempting us like crisp banknotes. But what lies behind that facade? Sometimes emptiness, and sometimes something darker and more dangerous. It's not just a story about a rich banker serial killer. The film makes us reflect on the complexity of human nature, the influence of society on the individual, and how easy it is to mistake surface-level appearances for depth. I hope this analysis helped you see the film in a new light. If you enjoyed the breakdown and deep character analysis, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll continue analyzing intriguing films and complex characters. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like. Your feedback helps me understand that you enjoy this kind of content. Patrick Bateman is one of the most multifaceted villains in film history. See you next time.